Hello, MCU fans. Today, finally, I'm resuming the video series on each of the Defenders characters' flashbacks. Of course, the Defenders shows are now Sacred Timeline canon, which is awesome. So I've been going back through each of their flashbacks to see how they inform us about their journey along the way. But last month was crazy. There was so much going on, and I'm sorry that it's taken forever to get back to this series, but I do plan on completing it with Iron Fist next. Now, keep in mind, there will be spoilers for the series because you can't talk about the flashbacks without revealing plot points, from the present-day storyline. But as long as you're okay with that, then let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Now, we've entered a new month, March, which means it's time for a new contest. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment. You might win a book or a steelbook. Best of luck. But that also means we need to announce the winner from the February contest. And that winner is Jake Made This. So Jake left a comment on The Marvels video, and he said, ironically enough, he said, I haven't watched the movie yet. It's on my list. Are you going to do a video on the Luke Cage flashbacks? No rush, just wondering. I can't believe this is the one that was randomly chosen. It's so perfect. So yes, Jake, I am going to do a video. In fact, it's right here. And good news, you won the contest last month. Go to the About section of my channel, and you can find out how to reach out to me, and we'll get you your prize right away. Also, don't forget we have the membership option in case you want to help me with my goal of doing this full time. And one of the perks that you get are some occasional shout outs. So I want to do that right now and shout out to everyone who is a supporter of the channel. I really, really appreciate you all. You're amazing. But I also say all the time, no matter how you support the channel, it's greatly appreciated. Even just liking videos, leaving comments, subscribing, it all goes a long way. So thank you so much. But especially thank you to the supporters. Okay, one last quick shout out to the wiki, the Marvel Cinematic Universe wiki. You can't do a video like this without the amazing resource that is the wiki that goes through the entire MCU timeline. And then, of course, Robbie and Drew, you guys helped me so much in taking that information, bringing it down to a smaller, simpler, easier to consume format, hopefully an interesting format. But I couldn't have done this without both of you. So thank you guys. You rock. All right. So once again, here's the Defenders timeline. I do have a video that goes through the whole timeline in case you're interested in how it fits in with the overall MCU. But we're going to focus on the flashbacks for Luke Cage's series. And in Luke Cage's case, all the flashbacks occur before his first season. There are no flashbacks in between the two seasons. And as you can see, the two seasons occur November to December of 2015 and then August to September of 2017. Okay, here we go. So there are so many characters that come to play in this first set of flashbacks that I thought it would be helpful to show the Stokes and McIver rivalry and how everybody fits together. So we have Mabel and Bugsy Stokes. They're married. Bugsy's brother, Pistol Pete, Stokes, the three of them have a criminal empire, and they all work together. On the other hand, we have Gwen and Quincy McIver, and they're obviously married. And then Quincy and Bugsy went together to both we're going to see a very important 50-50 split on Harlem's Paradise, a very important location in the main series of Luke Cage, and Bushmaster Rum. So Bugsy and Quincy end up shooting each other or killing each other before the flashbacks even start, and we're going to see how important that is to the flashbacks. Okay, we also will meet Mariah Dillard Stokes and Cornell Stokes, a.k.a. Cottonmouth. They are the grandchildren of Mabel and Bugsy. And then we have Tilda Stokes. What a mess. Tilda, we will learn, is the illegitimate daughter of Peter Stokes and Mariah Dillard. Yes, there is quite an age gap between them, and yes, that is really gross. Not Tilda's fault, obviously, but we're going to see how that actually comes into play into Pistol Pete's fate. And lastly, we have John McIver, a.k.a. Bushmaster, who is a main villain in the second season, and he, of course, is the son of Gwen and Quincy McIver. So there will be no test. I'm not expecting you to remember all this, but I thought maybe just showing all their faces and how they relate will help as we move into these flashbacks. Okay, speaking of, here is our first flashback. So it goes February of 1985 from Season 2, Episode 11. Notice in the upper right-hand corner, I will always include the season and the episode in case you want to go back and check it out. And the wiki is able to place this because they do tell us it's mid-80s, so that's why the wiki goes 1985. But we're also going to see that at the end of this series of flashbacks, there is a very, very clear date that lets everything be placed officially. All right, so We meet a young Cornell. That's Corny there, Cornell. And he's saying, May May, get in the pool. That's Mariah. And here we see Mariah. And she says, stop it, Corny, which is one of his nicknames. And then, of course, she calls him Cornell as well. You got my hair wet. So we meet Mariah and Cornell. We also meet John McIver, who ultimately will become known as Bushmaster. And he's working at the area that they're playing in. And then we see a very, very tense meeting. Okay, so let's look at the two rival sides in this meeting. We have Mabel and Peter Stokes, remember Pistol Pete, and their lawyer in the middle is Donovan. Now, Donovan, of course, is a character that appears a lot in present day as well, so it's kind of cool to see a young version of him. But they're on one side of this discussion, and on the other side is Gwen McIver and her lawyer. Of course, Bugsy and Quincy, the two husbands, aren't here because they've already killed each other at this point. And they're trying to decide what do they do with the agreement that that Quincy and Bugsy had. In particular, here we are, right? We got a napkin. Never do an agreement on a napkin, but nonetheless, notice it says Harlem's Paradise, Bushmaster Rum, 50-50 split. Signed, Bugsy and Quincy. So ultimately, Quincy ends up shooting Bugsy, and then Quincy ends up dying as well. But Quincy shot Bugsy, which kind of comes up in the conversation. That's like, he shot Bugsy. Why are we discussing whether this napkin agreement means anything? They shot each other, or he shot Bugsy. So things don't end well. They do not agree on whether or not they're going to go to court or whether they're going to deal with this reasonably, let's say, because we find out, no, we're going to go unreasonable. Yes, that is a splash of a Molotov cocktail of Bushmaster rum, how ironic, that is thrown in the room of Gwen McIver and her young son, John, again, who will become Bushmaster. And he's saying, you go out first, Mommy, with this fire. And she says, no, you go, help me after. Well, unfortunately, she does not make it out. And then when he's outside, John McIver sees, oh, the Molotov cocktail was thrown in by Mabel. Mabel is ruthless in these flashbacks. And then she even says, sorry, babe. Yeah, she's not sorry. Sorry, not sorry. Anyway, so that destroys the agreement, clearly, between the McIvers and the Stokes. Then we jump to January of 1987, and we see everybody a little further down the line. We see Cornell is a very good keyboardist, and of course he'll be playing the keyboard a lot in present day. And we see that Mariah is studying to be a lawyer, and ultimately, obviously, she decides to run into the political arena because she's in politics in present day. And then we meet Pop. Now, Pop, I haven't mentioned to this point, but he works for Mabel, but we will see him in another flashback, and of course we see him a lot in present day. Who we will not see in present day, however, is the gentleman standing in the middle. Now notice that Mabel is using clippers on those roses, because she's clipping roses, because that's going to come in handy when she deals with this dude. So she sends Pop out, and she says, my husband, his brother, and me, we built this here Harlem game brick by brick. And you know good and well, the one thing we never sell is drugs. So, I mean, they're crooks. Mabel's a crook and ruthless, but that's the one thing she does not want is drugs. This dude was selling drugs, so I'm not going to show it, but she uses those clippers to clip one of his fingers off and then ultimately to have him killed. But so Cornell is exposed to all of this, and definitely they want him to be involved in their empire. They want him to be part of the gang, if you will. So then we jump forward to March of 1987, Season 2, Episode 11. And here's part of the timeline hint, but it's going to get even more clear why these are placed where they are on the timeline. Notice this is 2 years later. So this is 2 years from those first flashbacks where they were discussing the 50-50 split and all that, right? So here's Bushmaster again, John McIver, young age. He's selling pineapples, plantains, and mangoes, everything fresh. But notice the dude reaching behind his shirt. Yeah, he does not want fresh fruit. No, he wants revenge. That is Pistol Pete. And he shoots Bushmaster in the stomach and then says, when you get to hell, tell Quincy that was for Bugsy. Because remember, this all started because Quincy and Bugsy got into a partnership together, and then Quincy shot Bugsy, and of course Quincy ultimately dies. So yeah, this vicious cycle of revenge in these flashbacks is insane. All right, so Bushmaster is then taken to get healed because he was obviously shot in the chest, very badly injured. They're asking, is this science? Is this a science thing? And the lady that's healing him says, no, it's Nightshade. Nightshade doesn't heal. Nightshade reveals. And she says to him, breathe if you want to live. Come on, darling, breathe. So he's breathing in that Nightshade, and it turns out that the Bushwoman's Nightshade, that's the lady that was helping him, hardened his skin. But he was special long before that. So this is how Bushmaster gets his hardened skin that we later see in season 2. Okay, then finally, now we're going to see how all of these flashbacks really get placed very clearly in the timeline. We're in April of 1987, and Peter Stokes, Pistol Pete, the guy that just shot Bushmaster a month ago, now ends up betraying Mabel. So she says, so you betrayed me. And you can probably guess what he was doing, right? Selling drugs. He was the reason that earlier kid that got his finger clipped off was selling drugs. So, unrepentant, Pistol Pete says, you always stay ready with the plan, so what is it? Well, Mabel shows him the plan. She has Cornell shoot him, takes him out back to shoot him. And then, of course, that's Mariah there. And remember I mentioned Tilda is the illegitimate daughter of Mariah and Pistol Pete. So this is where we find out about that, because she says, you deserve this for what you did to our family, for what you did to me. So yeah, yikes. Cornell does ultimately shoot down Pistol Pete in cold blood, and here's where we get our official placements in the timeline. Notice in present day, they're looking at when he was killed, and we learn that it is April of 1987. So we know he died then. The other flashback was 2 years earlier, and so you can see how this all fits in. So the wiki did, as always, a fantastic job placing things in the timeline. Okay, now, just as a summary, remember, here's all our different players. 4 of them are dead. Just in the flashbacks, we learn that 4 of them have died. And obviously, Mabel ultimately dies of old age down the road. So in present day, she's not alive. And then we have all of our other players in present day, Mariah, Cottonmouth, Tilda, and ultimately Bushmaster in season 2. So anyway, that's how that all fits together. Okay, then we do get this flashback about Pop. Remember, Pop was the one that was in that one scene briefly, and we now see that Cornell is going to be hanging with him. So Luke in present day is saying, so they call you Pop because you were the OG? And he says, nope, it was the sound my fist made when I knocked a fool out. I love that. Snap, crackle, pop. And then we learn how Cornell, Cottonmouth, got his nickname. He says Cottonmouth lost 3 teeth as a kid, and Wilfredo, or Fredo, this gentleman here who's also in their crew, saw him smile, and the name just stuck. And so then here we see Pop and Cornell and Fredo all hanging out in 1988. So why does the wiki place it in 1988? They use a technique that I really love. It makes total sense. They look at the age of the actors in this scene, particularly Pop and Cornell, who both appear in present day, and then they look at the ages of the actors playing them in present day, and you do the math. Boom, February 1988. Love it, love it. Okay, for this next set of flashbacks, we're going to look at some more key players because, man, everybody hates everybody in Luke Cage's series, rather. All right, so first, we have Etta Lucas and James Lucas. They are the parents of Carl Lucas, who ultimately we'll see why he renames himself to Luke Cage in this set of flashbacks, but his first was Carl Lucas. Now, it's important to note that James Lucas is a minister. Why do I say that? Because you wouldn't have expected him to sleep with his secretary, but he does. Or maybe you would expect him to. I don't know, depending on how you view pastors. But anyway, Lucas does indeed sleep with his secretary, Dana Stryker, and they have an illegitimate son, Willis Stryker. I should also mention the actor that plays James Lucas passed away in 2018, R.I.P. He's a fantastic actor, and he does a fantastic job of making you hate his character in this series. So R.I.P. to the actor, and again, fantastic performance, because you will hate him just from the flashbacks alone. All right, so this situation with the Lucases and Dana Stryker is what creates, at first, a friendship between Carl and Willis, but ultimately, Willis becomes Diamondback in season 1, and they are not friendly in season 1. So we're going to see how they go from being friends as kids to being enemies. Okay, so first we have an April 1990 flashback where a young Carl Lewis is walking through his father's church, season 1, episode 10, and his mom is saying, Carl needs you now more than ever. And once again, these things are dated by looking at the age of the actor in the scene that's playing Carl Lucas, and of course, Mike Coulter's age in present day playing Luke Cage. All right, so then on her way out, though, Mrs. Lucas sees Ms. Stryker, and it's a very tense little scene because obviously she knows, about the affair. And like, I guess, a good preacher's wife, she lets it go so her husband isn't in trouble with the congregation. But, oh my, ugly. All right, so then we see young Carl Lewis walking through the church, And ultimately, he heads to a door to open it, and sure enough, out comes the mistress, buttoning her top. And then I really like this shot, 'cause she's saying, Carl, she's surprised. But in the mirror, we see present-day Luke Cage, obviously, but to the right is young Carl Lucas. So really well-framed scene. I love that. But the impact of this affair, we will see, has very huge consequences down the line for Luke Cage. All right, so then we jump to November of 1996, where Willis, remember that's Willis Stryker, his illegitimate brother, half-brother, is training Carl in boxing. This is from Season 1, Episode 13, and it's placed in November of 1996 for a couple reasons. Once again, you can look at the age of the actors versus the age they are in present day, but also notice in the lower left-hand corner, Friday, November 15th. That's the date of a boxing match, and 1996 has a Friday, November 15th, so that really helps. Anyway, so young Stryker is saying 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, helping Luke Cage train to box. By the way, over in the far right, you can once again see the November 15th date there. And then Carl Lucas is saying, stop cursing at me, and Stryker's like, oh, now you sound like your old man, the minister, obviously. But this is cool. You see that they really do care for each other. He says, I still got you in my corner. And he says, always, always. So at this point, they're teenagers, but they're obviously still really care for each other. But then I thought this was interesting. To try to show Carl he ain't ready for boxing, Willis punches and then stops right in front of his face. But of course, if he was ready, he'd have ducked. But instead, he didn't see it coming. So he's trying to say, you ain't ready, Carl. You ain't ready. But that motivates him all the more, so that in January of 1997, when this boxing match happens, Carl wins. And it's important to keep in mind that he's a good boxer. That will come into play in some upcoming flashbacks. But notice Willis is cheering him on, screaming for joy at him winning in this match. But we will see that in just a few months, their friendship turns sour for some very unfortunate reasons. And that is this isn't really a flashback, but it's so important that I had to include it. This newspaper article shows us that in April of 1997, Season 1, Episode 10, that the son of a local preacher is charged with grand auto theft. So that of course, is referring to Carl, but Willis also got charged with it. So notice 2 youths are jailed after police pursuit. In fact, we see them here, Carl Lucas and Willis Stryker being arraigned in court. Well, something interesting that ends up happening is Carl's dad, the minister, uses his position as a minister to avoid jail time for Carl. And in fact, Carl then goes on to join the military and ultimately to become a cop, which is important. On the other hand, he lets poor Willis just stay in prison. Obviously, Willis is, from an affair. It's a bad situation. So he did not want to stick up for Willis. Things go very poorly for Willis in prison, and that's what leads to the resentment, ultimately, between Willis and Carl. In fact, we then see it in the second to last flashback, but it's a big flashback, really important flashback. Season 1, Episode 4, we now see that Carl Lucas is framed by Willis. Now, he doesn't know that yet. He doesn't know he's been framed by Willis. He's just framed. But remember I said he went to the military and then was a cop? Not a good thing to be a cop in prison. So notice the wiki places July of 2013. We're going to talk about these dates because I don't know that I agree with these placements, but the reasons why won't make sense till we get to the end of this flashback. And I also want to thank Drew for providing some good reasons why perhaps these flashbacks may need to move in their time a little bit. Anyway, so Carl is now in prison, and he's being told, you ain't got no rights. Long as you follow the rules, you'll be fine. No one does it alone. Now, this guy is named Rackham, and he is awful. So he's already trying to groom each of these men to realize you can't do this alone. You need me. And we're going to see what he wants them for, and it's not good. All right, so the first night in prison, Carl, who again knows he's innocent. He doesn't know Willis framed him yet. He'll find that out later, but he knows he's innocent. He says, I didn't do it. Just remember who you are. He's talking to himself. Just remember, and you'll get through this. I'm Carl Lucas, which is interesting, of course, because in the end, he has to throw away the Carl Lucas identity to become Luke Cage, and we'll see why. But yeah, it's really heartbreaking to think that, the way he stayed sane was remembering who he was. And then, of course, he had to throw that old life away. All right, so then we actually jump to season 2, episode 7, for this flashback, which is his parents visiting him in prison soon after he was thrown into jail. And he's saying to his dad, Daddy, I swear to God, I didn't do this. I'm innocent. And his dad says, you leave God out of this, and screams back at him, which, like I said, R.I.P. to the actor. He did such a great job of making you hate him, because while they don't realize at this point that Willis has framed Carl, still, his dad has the audacity to bring God into this, when his dad is the one that had the affair with the secretary, created the situation with Willis, didn't get Willis out of prison, let him rot there, and now Willis is getting revenge on Carl. So, dude, it was actually your fault. You caused all of this. I understand he didn't know that yet, but he did know that he had the affair. So, yeah, he makes you hate him throughout this series. Fantastic acting again, R.I.P. All right, so here's what's really sad. He looks at Luke and says, or Carl, let's keep calling him Carl for now. Carl, you did this. Seeing you locked up in here is what's making her sick, referring to his mother. So sadly, this is the last time Luke will see his mom before she passes away. He never gets out in time to see her. So very, very tragic, very sad, really, really motivates him throughout his time in prison. All right, so September 2013, we now see Carl attending his first intervention. And who's leading the intervention? That would be Reva. So you remember Reva has very, very important role in both Luke Cage's life, but also in Jessica Jones' life. And it's really confusing. Her flashbacks are confusing unless you try to put them all together. And even then, they're still a little confusing, but we're going to try to sort out what was up with her. She is an interesting woman. Anyway, she's saying Carl, wanting him to speak up at the intervention. And he says, I don't need to, want to, or have to get to know anybody. He does not want to talk. He's basically saying you can't trust nobody in a place like this. And trust is key. He will bring up trust multiple times. You can't trust nobody. All right. So, speaking of that, as they leave the intervention, this gentleman, Squabbles, who actually becomes very important in these flashbacks, tries to be a friend with him, tries to say, hey, you can't go this alone. And Luke Cage is like, if you're looking for a friend, keep looking, Squabbles, keep looking. So he pushes Squabbles away. Then this is really interesting. Once again, these are not flashbacks, but they are information about the past, so I like putting them in a flashback-type video. Season 1, Episode 10, Luke discovers videotapes that Reva made that show she was grooming him from the beginning, along with Rackham. She was working with Rackham and others, and we'll see what their endgame was. But this is the first of the videos he watches. Interestingly, the wiki does not place this in the timeline, which I was really surprised, because this is actually important stuff. So we see, presumably right after that first intervention, Reva's saying, regarding subject Lucus, Carl, he's interesting. And she goes on to describe just some general traits about him. But what this indicates is, from the get-go, she was behind all of this. Wild. All right, so then we go back to September of 2013, and we see Shades, who, of course, remember, Shades is very important throughout both Luke Cage Season 1 and Season 2, Rackham again, the cop, and Comanche, who also ends up showing up in present day. And Rackham says, see if he bends or breaks. So we're going to find out what Rackham's goal is here soon. So he sends them both in, Shades and Comanche, to beat the stuffings out of Carl Lucas. But Carl Lucas, being a boxer, remember, he's a very good fighter. He gets the upper hand. Even though he's stabbed in the arm, he knocks them both out and throws them out of his cell. Rackham's just looking on and says, guess I found me a gladiator. Because his plan is ultimately to get Carl into this illegal fight club. But because it looked like Carl was the aggressor, he wasn't, he was defending himself, that allows Rackham to send Carl into solitary confinement. So he jumped to October. He's been in there a month now. And so finally Rackham shows up and says, hey, how would you like to live like a king using them fists of yours? We got some bad boys with some pretty good, who's pretty good with their hands. And they make good money in here, really good money. So he's basically telling him, you work for me, and I'll make you money. I'll find you all kinds of extra perks, etc. But Carl doesn't trust anybody. He says slavery was always a good offer to a master. Wow. Love that quote, right? Just throws it back in his face. I'm not going to allow myself to be your slave with you as my master. So he says no, basically. So he stays another month in solitary. So now we've moved to November of 2013. He was 2 months in solitary confinement. Yikes. So what's the first thing he does? Notice in his right hand there, he grabs a weight. And he heads out. I mean, literally walking out of solitary, he heads straight towards Comanche and Shades, ready to pound the stuffings out of him. But it's Squabbles. Notice, who says, whoa, 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 whoa. Cop a squat before you do something stupid like catch a body. So he basically calms him down, calms Carl down, convinces him not to get revenge, or that's what they want. They want him to do that so they can beat on him some more. So this is when Carl and Squabbles start to form a friendship, which continues to grow stronger and stronger with time. So we go back to video number 2, which again, Luke is watching in present day, but learning what Reva was doing back in the past. And notice, Reva says, Lucas's increasing loyalty to Squabbles is an asset. I think Rackham's assertion that Carl wanting to protect his friend will make him more willing to take part in the fight is accurate. So yeah, there's Luke. You can see Luke's face as he's watching these videos, realizing, oh my gosh, this woman that we're going to see ultimately he marries, was in love with, was playing him. I do think there's a point where Reva does turn the corner and actually care about Luke, but it was not at this point. So she and Rackham are both realizing they can use Squabbles against Luke and make him go into the fight trials. Also, keep in mind how the way she says fight trials. The fights are a trial for something else. So now we're back to the interventions again. We moved to December of 2013. And Carl Lucas is saying to Reva, basically, what gives you the right to listen to us but not share anything about yourself? And this is interesting because this is the first time he's kind of prodding her, and she didn't reveal much, but she did appreciate that he was pushing back a little bit, right? So they hang out after the session. Everybody else is left. This is just them in the room. Well, a guard also. But anyway, Reva says, you did that to keep me from pressing you, didn't you? So she knows him. She understands what's going on, right? And this is when Luke starts to realize, you know what? You really do care, don't you? Well, she doesn't, but Luke thinks so. So they're kind of starting to become close here. And she says, I do care. Interesting. Then, in another intervention, somebody brings up a very important topic. So, some of the inmates think people are being experimented on in Seagate. So, it's more than just a fight club. There's experimentation going on, right? And Luke says, well, if it's true, why would you admit it to Reva? And Reva says, with a straight face, there are no experiments happening here. Well, we know that's not true, right? Because she clearly, we're going to see in a moment, but she is clearly involved in these experiments. So, man, she is lying up a storm. Insane. All right, so then they once again hang out after the intercession as they seemingly are becoming closer. I can't figure out if Reva even cares about him because she is literally grooming him to join this fight club, darn it. So I don't buy that she cares about him. But she says, you made a few mistakes, you caught a bad break. She's trying to get him to trust. And he says, do you know how I caught that bad break? Trusting people. And she says, so then why do you come here? Why do you stay, at these intercessions? You don't have to come. Why do you come to them? And he says, because you provide hope. So clearly he is falling for her. I'm just not convinced she's falling for him at this point. But anyway, so now Rackham decides to use Squabbles to his advantage, and he tells Carl, he says, you don't fight? I tear your little world apart, starting with your homie Squabbles. So behind them, if you can see in the room in there, there's a bunch of guards pounding on Squabbles. Anyway, pounding on poor Squabbles. And he's telling Luke, you want this stopped? You tell me what I want to hear. Which is basically that you're going to join my fight club, because he knows that Carl would be a major contender. And sure enough, Carl says yes to save Squabbles' life, and yeah, he is really good in the fight club. It's an illegal fight club. Obviously, Rackham is betting on it and betting on Lucas and winning a lot of money. He's winning a lot of money. So, yeah, basically, Carl starts doing this for an unknown amount of time, but clearly getting worse and worse physically in shape. Because Reva sees that. Notice the cuts on his eye. You can see it above his left eye there. And she says, were you attacked? And he's like, well, I got into a fight or two. And don't you love it? She's pretending like she doesn't know what happened. Were you attacked? Of course he was attacked. You helped groom him for this, lady. But anyway, he says, I got into a fight or two. And then she says, and this is key from a timeline standpoint, you haven't been to group, those interventions, in months. Keep that in mind, because that is important, and I don't think the timeline is reflecting it presently. But anyway, Carl looks over her shoulder there, and if you look on the far right, you can see the doctor leaning against the wall, and he says, "Who's the white dude?" And then she says, "That's the prison doctor, Dr. Bernstein." So obviously she knows Dr. Bernstein, and she's working with him. So yeah, she's been behind this from day one. What I think probably got Luke really suspicious is then she's talking to Shades, and Luke's probably like, or Carl's like, "Really? Really? That's the dude that pounded on me. I don't trust that guy at all. Why are they talking?" So I would have thought that's enough that Carl would not have trusted her anymore. But if it wasn't enough, he finally then sees the final video, or well, one of the last videos that he watches, at least, of her. And notice she's saying, Carl, or subject Lucas, is beginning to unravel. He doesn't shave, he doesn't groom, and he lives to fight, because he's been doing that fight club for a while now, right? But it remains to be seen if he'll be cleared for stage 3. Every single subject has died approaching that stage. Interesting. So, clearly, she has been manipulating this entire thing to try to get Carl Lucas into this experimentation with Dr. Bernstein. Man. And we're all the way to January. Keep in mind, because January 2014. So up to this point, she is still manipulating things behind the scenes. And I don't think she cares one bit about Carl Lucas. Anyway, Carl, on the other hand, does care about her, and he decides he's going to take Rackham down. He's been doing this fight club for a while. He keeps getting threatened more and more and more. So he goes to Reva because he really is concerned for her. He knows that Rackham has seen Carl with Reva, and since he's going after Squabbles to make Carl fight, Rackham might go after Reva next. So he says, this setup ain't happening without the warden being in on it, and he's warning her, you got to go. You got to go because it's going to get real. But then, I love it. Notice he narrows his eyes and says, you didn't know anything about this, did you? And she's like, oh, no, of course not. She's a good liar. But I do have to wonder, maybe this is finally when she got a soul, because she says to him, whenever, wherever you find me. Basically meaning if you succeed, if you take Rackham down, if you get out of prison, find me. So my guess is this is the first moment when she started to feel guilty about this whole situation. But anyway, never do this, right? Never do this. He goes to his friend Squabbles and tells Squabbles his plan. Oops. He says, I'm going to build evidence against Rackham, and I'm going to shut this down. Never do that, because you know what happens next, right? They find Squabbles, they beat the crap out of him, he tells them the plan, and then they kill him. It's just guaranteed. Never tell anybody your plan. Anyway, sure enough, that's what they do, and they get the information out of Squabbles, and now Shades and Comanche come back for attack number 2. And this one's important from a timeline standpoint. We'll get to that in a moment. But notice Shades says, especially since you're trying to expose everything that's going on at Seagate, we're here to take care of you. Now remember, last time, Lucas took care of him. Carl Lucas beat the crap out of him. This time, though, they came with some heavy artillery. Shades has got whatever that is, some metal bar with some screws coming out of it. That would have to hurt. And then Comanche's got a crowbar. So, yeah, even though Lucas is bigger than them and a better fighter overall, you're not going to win versus this. So sure enough, they beat the crap out of him. I mean, just within an inch of his life. And now he ends up, ironically, right in that experimental lab with Dr. Bernstein and Reva. So Reva comes up to him. He looks her in the eye, barely. He can't even open his eyes. But he says, I trusted you. And she says, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. They beat it out of Squabbles. And I actually believe her at this point. I believe that she didn't do this. She didn't want this. But nonetheless, Squabbles, unfortunately, was killed in the process. So now Reva has no choice but to send him in with Dr. Bernstein for the experimentation. She ends up leaving, but Bernstein continues doing this experiment. They lower him into this tube, and supposedly this is to help heal him. It would just heal his wounds. I think ultimately they were doing a good thing. They were trying to come up with this way of advanced healing of people who are really bruised. But to make them go to Fight Club first, to then come here, it was just, her setup was terrible. So I still don't trust her. But anyway, maybe he would have just been healed and that's it. But look who shows up. That's Rackham, looking in there saying, you're going to die tonight, Carl. Because he finds out Carl's been sent in to the experimentation room. And he then holds the doctor at hostage. Remember, Reva's left. Holds the doctor hostage and turns the machine on full. So whatever it was going to do to Luke, we'll never know. because, or to Carl, we'll never know, because Carl is exposed to massive levels of this machine. It blows up. It kills Rackham in the process, and out walks now who we looks so much more familiar as Luke Cage, right? He hasn't changed his name yet, but he's looking more and more like himself because it's completely healed him and it's given him his rock-hard skin. So in anger, he punches the wall and realizes that didn't even hurt and gives us his famous phrase, "Sweet Christmas." Love that. So then he breaks out of prison because now he's really strong. And now he finally finds these clothes to put on. And here's a brighter picture. I think this is a promo art. But yeah, I love how they give us the wink and the nod to his outfit from the comics. Almost every one of the series of the Defenders showed us the comic accurate, if you will, costumes, even just for a few minutes. But then I love it. He looks in the window and sees himself and says, "You look like a damn fool." That's funny. That's funny. So he gets rid of the headband at least. But remember, Reva said, "If you get out, call me." So sure enough, he says, "I'd like to place a collect call to Dr. Reva Connors." And he shows up in a hotel privately, because obviously he's on the run. Although I think they thought he died. I think they all assumed he died at that with that explosion, because no one escapes from Seagate. He swam across the river. He would have been killed. A normal person would have been killed, but of course nothing could bite him because of his rock-hard skin. But anyway, so they think he's dead, but he's hanging out with Reva. And then here is our only tie-in to the Jessica Jones storyline, because we see Reva with this zip drive. And you might remember the zip drive had on it the experimentation done on Kilgrave when he was a child. Now, what they never tell us is, how did she get this information? How did she get this zip drive? Why does she eventually want to bury it, which we're going to show the Jessica Jones flashbacks in a moment to tie all this together. But why does she bury it? And how the heck does Kilgrave even find out she had it to then, have Jessica Jones make her unbury it? So much they don't explain, but you can assume if she was doing illegal experimentation at Seagate, maybe she had access to other illegal experimentation, including what was done on Kilgrave. So that's my theory. But anyway, let me know if you have thoughts. But here she is thinking about that zip drive and realizing, I got to get rid of this. So I really think this is when she was trying to turn over her life and push the past away and move on. So I love this. She's talking to Carl, and Carl says, "When we asked you about the experiments, you said they weren't true." And she says, "I promise I'll explain it all." Oh my goodness, if only they would have let us know this conversation. I really wanted to hear more information on how she got involved in the experimentation, etc. Why this wasn't in a flashback is beyond me. But we don't learn any more, unfortunately, and we have to draw our own conclusions. Then she says to him, "You're going to need a new name." And finally now, Carl Lucas becomes Luke Cage. And so he gets rid of his old identity to move on, which, of course, throughout season one of Luke Cage, his past is found out, and they tie all this together. But nonetheless, at this point, he becomes Luke Cage. So then we know that Luke and Reva got married, and actually season 2, episode 7 has this really blink-and-you-miss-it scene with him, with Reva. Presumably this is after they're married. But we're going to see they definitely get married, because in season 1, episode 2, Pop, in present day, says, "Now, I haven't seen Reva since she was 5, and then she comes home with a convict husband," referring to Luke, "and a shaky story, and I didn't ask her no questions." So clearly, Reva was tied in with Pop somehow, which is interesting. We don't really learn any more about that, but we know that Luke and Reva got married, right? And we know that Reva introduced him to Pop. Okay, that's good. Also, this is key. In Jessica Jones, season 1, episode 12, we learn that they opened the bar together, Reva and Luke, because Jessica says, "They're going to want to question you. Your bar just blew up." And Luke says, "Reva made sure my name wasn't anywhere on that paperwork." So, obviously, for Reva to do that, this had to happen while Reva was still alive. So, yeah, a lot happened here while they were, once Luke got out of prison. They got married. Luke met Pop. They bought a bar and put it in Reva's name, and then now we're going to see Reva buried that evidence at some point, because in the Jessica Jones series, season 1, episode 6, we see Jessica, digging to find the zip drive. We see Reva standing there at Kilgrave's command, so Kilgrave has taken her and Jessica over, and sure enough, there's the zip drive. So, yeah, really confusing. I wish they had filled in more of the dots on how on earth Reva found this thing to begin with and why she buried it and then how Kilgrave knew, but you just got to let it go, that it is what it is. It all fits. It just, they left a lot of holes there. But anyway, there's Kilgrave looking at the information, again, that has information on the experimentation on him that he wants hidden. And then he orders Jessica to take care of her. And so we see one last look at Reva before Jessica shoves her really hard, probably killed her with that shove right there, but out into the street. And then Kilgrave says, let's go, leave her be. But Jessica realizes, I just killed her. I mean, that's a little bit of blood on her fingers because she pushed her so hard, and I'm sure she slammed her head on the ground. And that's what allowed Jessica to get out of Kilgrave's control. Then he's screaming again, leave her be, get back here, Jessica. And Jessica takes off because she's no longer under his control. She's really confused and wanders off, but she's not under his control. Notice bus horn is honking. He's now screaming at her, but you can see the bus coming in the lower right-hand corner. And sure enough, then he turns and sees it, and Kilgrave gets whacked by the bus as it skids out and hits him. So this is where we get the only really good timeline placement to try to put all the flashbacks we've just looked at. They're all tied back because, the bus crashes, Jessica walks off, but she later checks to see about, what happened here, what happened with Reva, what happened with Kilgrave, etc., and we get a date. Notice, January 20th of 2014. So we know that Reva at least died. Now they kept Kilgrave's death a secret, but off the books, if you will. But notice, Reva's death, January 2014. And here again, she's scanning on the computer. So we know at least concretely for sure that the last time the Reva was alive was January 2014. So then we have to kind of back things up to figure out Luke's time in prison. I should mention this first, though. We do have this flashback, Season 2, Episode 7. Real quick, again, blink and you miss it, but you see Luke at Reva's funeral. So what do we do with this? What do we do with this timeline? Well, here is a really important timeline piece that we need to look at. So, Season 1, Episode 1, when Shades gets out of prison, he's talking to Cornell, Cottonmouth. I love Cottonmouth. And he is coming back as Blade, we hope, right? Fingers crossed. Please give us Blade, because Marshawn Ali was so good. He's so good as Cottonmouth. But anyway, he asks Shades, when did you come home? Shades takes a deep breath and says, a while ago. Keep that in mind. Remember, this is the Shades that beat up Luke Cage in prison, right? He says, I got out a while ago. Seagate wasn't that bad. I know that's not what he said, but we're going with Seagate wasn't that bad. Anyway, so Shades in Episode 1 to Cornell says, I got out a while ago, right? Then, hilariously, in Episode 2, one episode later, now Shades is talking to Luke Cage, probably recognizes him. Maybe he's probably distantly like, you look familiar. But he says, I just got home from 3 years in Seagate. I just got home. Even though he told Cornell last episode it was a while ago. So this is really important because the wiki now has to choose. The wiki had to make a choice. Do we go with Shades from Episode 1 that says it was a while ago? Or do we go with Shades from Episode 2 when he says I just got home? So the wiki seemed to lean more towards the just got home. My opinion is his first response is probably more truthful because the response he gave to Cornell would be honest. The response he gave to Luke Cage, he's going to lie. And I think he vaguely was recognizing him and getting suspicious. So there's no way he's going to give out accurate information. So I think the a while ago is the truthful statement, not the other one. But I do love this. Cornell is also in this barbershop. And here's Shades giving two different answers. So this side eye, right? Like, dude, what you talking about, Willis? You just literally told me it was a while ago, and now you're saying you just got out? Get your story straight, man. But anyway, I think it's really important to acknowledge that we got two different stories there. Then also, one other final timeline thing before we look at why I think the wiki may need to update the timeline. So Shades, in Season 2, Episode 12, says, my last year in Seagate, me and Comanche got paid by this juiced-up guard Rackham, remember, to beat the crap out of some guy named Carl Lucus. Lucus should have died. So, what did he tell us there? It was during his final year at Seagate. All right. So, let's look at the prison flashbacks we've been discussing. So, really quickly spinning through this. Carl Lucus is framed and sent to jail. The wiki has that in July of 2013. He received the visit from his parents, remember? He attends his first intervention with Reva. Shades and Comanche end up attacking Carl. He ends up going to solitary, remember? He finally gets out 2 months later and becomes friends with Squabbles. Carl and Reva begin to become close. Squabbles is threatened, which leads Carl to join the Fight Club, right? Reva eventually shows concern for how messed up Carl looks, and Carl finally decides to take Rackham down. Shades and Comanche attack him the second time. That's important. Carl's experimented on, breaks free. Then we have all this stuff between Carl and Reva, where they're married, they open the bar, Reva introduces him to Pops, Reva buries the drive, right? And then finally, Reva is killed. Then Shades is released from prison. The wiki goes with March of 2015 for that. And then Shades either got out a while ago or he just got home. Okay, so what do you do with this? Well, there's a couple problems to me with this current timeline on the wiki. Number one, we have Reva and Carl becoming close in December of 2013 and then basically getting married in January of 2014. That seems too quick to me because, again, Reva was setting him up. Reva didn't care. He was just one more experiment to her. And then suddenly they want to get married. I think there needs to be a bigger gap there, and we'll talk about that. Plus, we're basically saying he got out of prison, and then 2 weeks later, they managed to get married, open the bar, bury the zip drive, meet Pops, and then she's killed by Jessica Jones in just 2 weeks span of time. I don't think that's enough. So I think this needs to be expanded more. I think we need more time here for this period of time that he's in jail. And it really comes down to which Shades do we believe? The one that said a while ago or the one that said I just got home? I think just got home is he was full of crap. I think he was lying because he was in a public place in the barber shop, and he was suspicious of Luke Cage. So if we go with a while ago, I think we can push these dates back. We can stretch out Carl's time in prison, right? And we'll talk about why that's important in a second. Also, if we go with a while ago, we can push back when Shades got out of prison. So instead of where the wiki has it in March, which, again, they were going off of just got home, and they still had to make it the gap between March and November. But if we go with a while ago, we can push it all the way back and make this make more sense. Okay, so why do I think this timeline works perfectly versus what the wiki has? Well, first of all, now there's a big distance between the amount of time when Carl and Reva start to get close to each other and when they actually end up getting married. I just feel that fits a little better. Remember, there was one point when she said, you haven't been to intervention to the group in months. Well, now we have at least 2 months there. Could be even more. Could spread it even more. But this helps make more sense. What I really like about doing this is it makes a 3-month period of time between when Carl breaks out of prison and when he and Reva are married. They open the bar. She introduces him to Pops, buries the zip drive, and finally is killed. I just think the 2 weeks the wiki gives is not enough. Instead, we have a nice solid 3 months, so I really like that. We have it being in the last year that Shades is in prison because he's released in October of 2014. Remember, he said it was in the last year that he was in prison that he attacked Carl Lucus and should have killed him. So you have that. And then finally, we have Shades getting out of prison a while ago because the just got home I'm ignoring. I think he was lying. And now it's been a year. It's been a year, so he did get out of prison a while ago. I like this better. Let me know what you think. I mean, I don't know whether the wiki will change their mind. Normally, I go 100% with anything on the wiki, but I think this fits better. So let me know your thoughts. Okay, then we have one very, very small flashback to wrap this up. It happens in June of 2014. This is from Season 2, Episode 5. And this is Misty Knight basically reflecting back on her partner, Rafael, and how he showed signs of being a dirty cop even in the past, and she kind of just let him go. So we have this scene where she's looking for a gun. She can't find the gun to pin this dude. And Rafael says, well, it's in here somewhere. We just got to sniff it out. Cockroach is the one they're going after. That's his name, literally, Cockroach. He says, you ain't gonna find no gun because there ain't no gun. And magically, Rafael finds a gun. It was behind the headboard. So that's number one. That looked kind of suspicious, and Misty's thinking about that in present day. And then this is a second situation where she's talking about a different person she's trying to arrest, but she can't prove it. She says, I know he's guilty, but I can't prove it. And Rafael says, well, it ain't a setup if he's guilty, and you said it, he's guilty. So he's basically saying, set him up, plant some illegal evidence. He's guilty, right? And I love the shocked look on Misty's face, like, what are you talking about? And then he goes, oh, no, I had you. I'm just kidding. But it'd be nice if it was that easy, wouldn't it, though? So again, these are things that she's thinking about, realizing, yeah, I had a lot of signs that he was crooked, and I just let him go. And then this is important from a timing standpoint. Why is it June of 2014? Well, he says, I got to get home and see Earl, his son. I told him if he would wait up, that we would watch the Mets game. So it's during baseball season. That's why the wiki goes with June of 2014. And then Earl is important because in this final flashback where Misty's thinking about all these suspicious things, Earl accidentally shoots himself with Rafael's gun that he didn't leave locked up. And Rafael says it was punishment. It was God. He's paying me back for all the things I've done. So Misty's thinking about the fact that he's kind of admitting here he's done bad things. She just didn't think about what. Turns out the bad things were he planted evidence left and right. So these flashbacks are important for season 2, particularly episode 5, but minor in the grand scheme of things, but I wanted to have everything laid out. So there you go. These are the flashbacks for Luke Cage's series. Again, they all take place before the first season, November to December of 2015. And then also, don't forget, we do have the Googlesheet Timeline doc out there. It has all this information, all the flashbacks, etc. It is sorted by default by timeline month and year, because I like timeline order better, but you can go and sort it by anything you want. You can sort it by release order, for instance. You can actually save your own temporary view, or you can download the file and edit away, right? Also, you can filter. You can filter by movies, by flashbacks, by the Netflix shows, etc. And this is what's cool. If you sort it by release order and filter by Netflix, then you can see like season 1, Luke Cage season 1, down at the very bottom, it also sorts all the flashbacks. So as you watch season 1, if you just want to know when they're happening, even though you're looking at it in release order, we now have in timeline order all the flashbacks. It's really kind of cool. It's a double sort, kind of. But anyway, lots of great information out there. If you ever see anything wrong, let me know. I'll update it right away. But go check this thing out. As I mentioned, we have the March contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment, win a book or a steel book. And of course, we have the membership option in case you're interested in that. And lastly, I always love to mention the Discord. We do have a timeline channel where people are talking timeline, right? No big surprise. I will leave a pinned comment that also has how you can join the Discord. Over 1,200 people on the server across the globe, conversations happening 24/7. Love to have you be part of it. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.